Slept on Cinema is sponsored by Training Ties, the ultimate shoe tying tool. If you know someone who's struggling with shoe tying for any reason, Training Ties is the perfect solution.
You'd think that by now, even Sylvester Stallone might be bored playing underdogs who beat the odds and become winners.
Over the Top lives down to its title in the cheesiest of ways.
The movie is so out of control and has some unsettling moments between father and son.
A movie about arm wrestling. What's next? Crab soccer?
The story is formulaic, and the characters have the depth of a toilet bowl.
The arm wrestling championships eat up about 1/3 of the movie, which is a lot of grunting, snarling, and perspiring. All things being relative, this beats what passes for drama in the rest of the movie.
Welcome to Slept on Cinema. I am Stan Steamer. I'm here with my co-host, Grove Street. And today, warm up those biceps because we are getting into Over the Top. As always, our films have to be below 50% for both critics and audiences on Rotten Tomatoes. And I think both critics and audiences just weren't prepared for the raw emotion and raw power that this film delivers. Coming in at 32 for critics and 49 for audience. Grove, you want to take us away with the rotten premise?
Rotten Tomatoes didn't treat this with a lot of respect. They did their premise pretty quickly. A trucker yanks his snooty son out of military school and goes to Las Vegas to arm wrestle. Critics 32%, audience 49%. And I just wanted to compare this to what Amazon Prime had this, how they described it, which is very, very different. So this is Amazon Prime. A championship title, a huge cash award, and his son's love, the greatest prize of all, are at stake when Hawk battles his strongest enemy for everything he has ever wanted. Sylvester Stallone stars in this powerful and exciting film, his most challenging role to date.
I mean, that is giving this movie its due. Whoever wrote that review, we should bring on this podcast. He or she would fit right in.
Yep. Sounds like they appreciated this movie and at least saw it for what it was. But this was, I thought it was hilarious. The difference between those two synopsises.
Yeah, it's one person who gets it and one person
doesn't.
Has their head in a toilet bowl.
A very shallow one. You want to go to current events?
All right, current events. So this is, this was 1987. It's a different time in this country. It's, Ronald Reagan is president, if you can think back that far. Maybe what's most important to understand about this movie is where things were with the production company of this movie. Give you just a little background here. This film production company, Cannon Films, that made this film. And basically it was two Israeli guys who just churned out low-budget movies year after year after year. They were sort of on your exploitation, often sexualized nudity, and they would just crank these things out. They were apparently unbelievable fundraisers. They would, and this is a brilliant idea. I don't know why people aren't doing this now. Maybe they are. They would often make a movie poster and get some stars lined up, make the movie poster, make it look awesome, badass, and then go sell it as if this was a fully baked movie, to then go actually film this movie based off of just the poster. Some of their classics you might have heard of, Enter the Ninja, Return of the Ninja, Ninja 3, The Domination. But generally they had a pretty poor reputation in Hollywood. They pretty much made the career of Chuck Norris. So almost any Chuck Norris movie would be a Cannon production. So they would just line these things up, and it was pretty much either Chuck Norris or late career Charles Bronson. And they would just churn these movies out.
Well, that explains the really good posters for those movies.
They had a winning combination. But what happened to them in the 80s, and a lot of people got swept up in this in the 80s. They got swept up in the junk bond era. So there was this guy famous from the junk bond era, Michael Milken, who was raising all sorts of money for these trash companies all over the place. He realized that he could move on to raising money for sort of trash movies. And this guy, he raised $300 million for Cannon Films so they could make movies. They kind of started to just make movies that were a little too big for them. They, instead of just writing these sort of cheap, low budget movies that they could churn out, they started doing a little bit bigger budget stuff. Some of them didn't go well. They burned through a lot of their money. And they had a pretty significant bond payment coming due. And they were pretty much facing down bankruptcy at this point. Also a little bit of an SEC investigation. They had maybe stretched the truth when they were doing some of these bond issuances. about their financing. So they had bankruptcy looming. They had an SEC investigation going on, and they decided to go for broke here. And they said, we need the biggest star in movies right now. We need Sylvester Stallone. They go out and cut him a check for $12 million, which is one of the biggest movie checks ever at this point in time. But they don't stop there. So they went out and said, we're not just going to have this movie. We're going to stage a year-long arm wrestling tournament to drum up interest in this movie. All over the US, all over Europe, Japan. And it culminated with an 18-hour arm wrestling contest in Las Vegas. Pretty much all the arm wrestling you see in this movie in Vegas, aside from the scenes of Stallone, are actual shots from that arm wrestling tournament. I think it helped the movie a lot. It didn't help them. They didn't last much longer. And apparently also they had owned the rights to Superman 4, and they blew most of their money on this movie and had to take out all the special effects budget from Superman 4. So if you ever watch Superman 4, some of the special effects are a little bit lacking directly because this movie did not end up doing so well.
Get Superman 4. I'd have to go back and rewatch that.
Knowing that, I think, puts you in a good frame of mind to sort of experience this movie.
Yeah, I knew that they had real shots of the arm wrestling competition. I didn't realize it was a competition that they started way in advance to get ready for the filming of the movie. That's incredible.
Yeah. And I love the idea of the trucker class too, because as you'll see, once you get into the film, it becomes apparent that there are no weight classes in the trucker class, because otherwise you're like, how could these guys possibly lining up? But then it makes sense. All right, they're all truckers. You can fit in a cab. You're in the same class.
You can reach the pedals. You're good to go. We'll move over to Bolo. Be on the lookout. I'll go first. Be on the lookout for face slapping. Good way to get ready for a match is maybe the only way, I guess, is to get slapped in the face.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't arm wrestled recently, but if I did, I think I'd, after watching this, probably slap myself in the face 2 times.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm going to go with one awesome set of mud flaps.
Yep, I have that down as well. That's great. I'll go with a changing last name for a character. His name is one thing sometimes, and then another for another bit of the movie, and sort of comes back all around to where it started.
I noted that one as well, and was thinking, are they just making him an everyman? You know, his last name doesn't even really matter because he's all of us. That's how I took it. But
that's how I'd like to take it.
I am going to go with one clip-on tie.
We'll be on the lookout for a broken arm. I think I read that during the whole competition there were 2 broken arms, but they caught this one. They didn't really make much of a big deal of it, but just be on the lookout. In one of the matches, there could be a broken arm.
Yeah, it's one of those things that you're glad they got that on camera, and they didn't make a big deal of it, as I'm sure they don't in arm wrestling contests. Dude broke his arm. Next. Yeah,
they play the Fox injury music of a man down, and then commercial break, and next match is ready.
Right back at it. I'm going to go with truck cab exercise equipment. Be on the lookout.
That's good. I'll go with shoe lifts. Didn't expect to see them, but lifts on shoes. Apparently very important during arm wrestling. Makes sense for leverage.
I'm going to go with be on the lookout for 42 arm wrestling matches.
Wow, it's that many?
That's what I counted at, but there is a few rapid fire montages. So, plus or minus.
Oh, wow. I'll just go with product placements.
Oh, yeah. Definitely be on the lookout. We'll touch on that. We'll touch on that later on as well. But I'm going to say one and only one reference to the final tournament being double elimination.
That's very important. We'll get into that at the second half for sure.
And only one, which I might have miscounted. I'm not sure.
I'm all out of bolos if you have any more.
The only one I had left was 5 references to the movie name in the movie, which I was kind of expecting more, to be honest, but I think it's just 5.
Wow, I thought it was way more than that. All right, we'll move on to our last segment before we break. What drink to pair with this movie? So what drink should you have in hand when watching this movie? Tough choice between 2 options I had, but I'm going to go with a Boilermaker. I feel like if you drop a whiskey into a beer and sit down and watch this movie, especially the second half, you're going to be in a good place.
I think you're always in a good place when you're drinking a Boilermaker. I'm going to go with, and I don't know, I'm sure people have their own term for this, but I'm going to go with jet fuel. And I'm not saying drink actual jet fuel. It's just coffee, really bad coffee that you pour way too much whiskey into. For 2 reasons. One, you might, if you're paying close attention, see someone drinking something pretty close to jet fuel in the movie. And also, I think it'll get you amped up because I know after watching this movie, I just wanted to arm wrestle so bad after watching this. So if you're watching with someone you can arm wrestle with, that'll probably give you a little bit of an edge as well.
Yeah, and if you don't have anyone to slap you in the face before a big match, then having some jet fuel, I think, would get you ready just as well.
Yep. Perfect drink.
All right, this is where we're going to break. Can't wait to come back and discuss after everyone sees the movie.
Enjoy.
What are the odds on Lincoln Hawks win?
20 to 1, pal. Real long shot.
The world has always bet against Lincoln Hawks.
This guy's nothing.
But a winner never listens to the odds.
Whatever happens, I want you to stay with him.
You ain't got a prayer in Vegas.
You're my boy, do you understand?
The world beats nobody halfway. Now is the time to do for yourself.
I'm all you.
Over the top, Dad, over the top.
Sylvester Stallone, Over the Top.
Welcome back. That was a lot of fun.
I'm glad I had all that jet fuel. I am feeling good. I want to arm wrestle everyone, and I will win.
Let's get started right away with the draft. I'll defer to you. You get pick one, round one.
Pick one, round one, and I feel like there's no way I'm not stealing this right off of your draft board. But I'm going to go with flipping your hat around. I think that flipping your hat around is just a dynamite move. Flipping the hat around gets you in the right state of mind. It probably strikes fear into the heart of your opponent. I think it sums up his essence. It's a little bit understated, but also tells you that he knows what is about to go down here.
That's a great first pick. It's too bad he didn't have the hat in all the scenes, but the scenes where he did have the hat, it was usually pretty effective. I'm going to go with off-camera heckling. I really enjoy, there's a lot of nonsense being said during the matches and just get him, smasher, and lots of little comments. He's got a grip like a girl. Maybe he is a girl. Like there's always little comments coming from the balcony and just chirping from the background. That is incredible. I know they must have had a lot of fun putting those comments in as if the people there were actually saying them. But the background nonsense and off-camera heckling, I really enjoyed.
I completely agree. And I wonder how much of that was real. I wonder how much of that was from the 18-hour tournament. It would not surprise me if those were just totally off the cuff people at this tournament, hot mic, picking up some gems. That would not surprise me.
I mean, neither. All right, second round, first pick. I'm going to go with scenes where the girl's dad offers the guy, usually a poorer person, money to get away from their daughter or to leave the family. I remember in Cocktail that happened. I really love those scenes where the guy really needs the money, but out of principle, he will turn down no matter what. Like he gets offered a ton. Basically what he was trying that whole match for. He gets the truck in a large amount and his pride says no, I'll do it on his own, and he turns it down, and so that it ultimately works out in his favor. But the scene where he gets someone tries to get bought off from doing what the dad doesn't want them to do.
I think it's a great scene. And it's also, I feel like it gives you a real sense into who the grandfather is. And I am very curious on his background. All right, my second round pick, and I'm so glad that this is still around. I'm going with the character John Grizzly. It's tough to watch a Stallone movie and have Stallone not be your favorite character, but my favorite character in this movie might be John Grizzly. He's the one who eats the cigar. He's the one who drinks the motor oil. He's the most amped up. He's got the crazy hair. And I did do a little bit of digging on this guy because I was like, who is this man? I need to know everything about him. And he has kind of a crazy background. So he is a professional arm wrestler. So the arm wrestling you see in this is from him in the tournament. His first arm wrestling match ever. He's going up to it. It's a charity event. He's never arm wrestled before. It's sort of I don't know, not for professionals. He doesn't know what he's doing. He walks up to it. He's smoking a cigar. The ref tells him, you got to put that out. Nowhere to put it out. He swallows it. This was based on a true story. Swallows the cigar. Opponent is like, what is going on? He still loses the match. He doesn't win, but he is a crowd favorite. He kind of started to make that his thing. He decides to go pro and it starts to sort of doing all these antics. The only other one that I'll touch on, he's up against this guy, first round, 615-pound dude. The cigar's not going to cut it. He goes to this pet store and gets a bird. He then practices holding the bird in his mouth. He figures, ref's going to say 1, 2. I'm going to open my mouth. This bird's going to fly out. Ref's going to say go. I'm going to crush this guy. trains the whole bird, gets the bird in his mouth. Ref says 1, 2, lets the bird out of his mouth. Ref is too stunned to say go. Everyone's stunned. They watch the bird fly away, and then they compose themselves, and he gets absolutely crushed by the 615-pound man. But nonetheless, he went for it. That's my man, John Grizzly. So I get third round, first pick in the third round. I'm going to go with the speed at which they dispensed with the mom. This is clearly a men's movie. They just barely have one female character. She's in it. She clearly played her role. And then they don't waste any time with dealing with her death at the hospital. You don't have the tearful goodbye. She's dead. You missed it. And most movies, I think, would waste a lot of time with the hospital, the tearful farewell, the goodbye, the all that. Brilliant move, because at that point, we just need to get to the third act of the movie.
Yeah, that's an incredible pick. I guess I'll round out the third round with slow motion scenes. The last half of the movie is about a half hour, but if there was no slow motion, it may have been only 10 minutes. Some of it is really prolonged, and the grunting and the perspiring that you talked about in the beginning is all there, and it's not a negative. It is incredible. The slow motion scenes are some of my favorite scenes in the movie.
I completely agree. And I think that was probably what has scared so many people off about doing a great movie about arm wrestling. You know, it's tough to do a sports movie where the entire sport takes place in a matter of seconds. So you need that slow motion. Great pick.
Thank you. All right, we'll go to our sleeper section. This is tough. I had two options here, but I'm going to go with a child driving big trucks. It seems to just be no big deal. Initially, it started off as a way to show the kid that he isn't as smart as he thinks he is, but eventually it turned out into showing them that it's okay to laugh. And then it gave him the confidence later on to steal another pickup truck, and make his way to the airport. There was just no problem with kids driving all over the country.
And I'm going to throw something out here because I also have two. How do you feel about doing two sleeper rounds right now?
I love it. Let's go.
All right. I am going to go for my first sleeper pick. This was one of Bull Hurley's lines when he's in his documentary. And he just says, "I drive truck." And it's not I drive trucks. It's I drive truck. And never have I heard anything that made me want to be a truck driver more than him saying, "I drive truck." That is just like, it's so much of a thing when he said that. And I was like, that, you nailed that line. You made me want to quit my job and become a truck driver just so I can say, "Hey, what do you do?" "I drive truck." All right, I'm going to, the first ever double sleeper round. I'm going to go for my second sleeper pick. Michael's name. I think his first name was a great pick. It's kind of a chuckle because he starts off being Michael Cutler with the grandfather's name. He's going to change over to Hawk, at which point he's Mike Hawk.
Yeah, incredible.
And that's just a fun little ha-ha. They don't have to say it. They don't have to rub it in your face. But anytime you can
I feel like that's how this movie was. This movie was one long dick joke. Just at the end.
And they just snuck that one in. And I thought that was just a great little move.
Yeah, that's a great pick. I can't believe that made it to the sleeper round. That's really good. I'm going to go safely running into ridiculous traffic. I just didn't see that scene coming. Just kind of pull over on the highway and put a leash on that kid. I think it was one heckle off camera, which was great. But I think 3 or 4 cars just sort of spun around, and all he had to do was grab him. He loses a sleeve or whatever. They get back in the truck and they kind of move past it. But it feels like that would have been a big moment. And it really was just him just coming to grips with the fact that he didn't like his dad and he needed to get it out. He was having a bit of a panic attack there, but he somehow found a way to safely run across like 4 lanes of highway traffic.
It was definitely a bit of a tantrum, and lucky he escaped with only a torn jacket.
And let's move to one change to be a blockbuster. I'll go first on this one. It was a 2-part movie, but the first part was about an hour. The second part was a half hour. First part being the drama, second part being the arm wrestling championship. I would have probably leaned into more of the arm wrestling and sort of weave that into the story earlier. So it's not just 2 different movies. It's very easy to like the first half or vice versa and hate the second half because they're just completely different movies. It's kind of like you go from a drama, father-son love story to like a kumite. at the end. I think if there was just more arm wrestling about a half hour into the movie and we didn't have to wait so long to get to that point, at that point, probably lots of people have turned the movie off and already come up with their decision of the movie. So I would have liked to have seen 2/3 of the movie arm wrestling and 1/3 the father-son love story.
I actually had the exact same thing. I don't know, this is the first time we've had this, so it's clearly what should have happened. 42 arm wrestling matches, give me 100. Give me all the matches. You know, if there were 2 broken arms, I want to see both broken arms. I want more slow-mo. I want more grunting. I want more oiled biceps.
More gasoline chugging.
Whatever anyone's doing, more face slapping. I want to see more. I want to get to know some of these other arm wrestlers. I'm glad we got as much of it as we did, but yeah, I would totally agree. Flip the ratios.
We could have seen more of like the board placements. What made like the Kumite so good in Bloodsport is like you see the names up on the board, you know what's coming up, and if there was a little pause to see who was battling who, and there was a little time to build up the drama, I think that could have stretched into 2/3 of the movie. All right, so we have the same change via Blockbuster. Do you want to go with what's our best of this week?
Best product placement. For us watching this, it became clear that there was really a lot of product placement. And I think understanding the background of this movie, that really they needed to make as much money as they possibly could from this movie to pay off, the hundreds of millions of dollars that they had coming due. The product placement makes a lot of sense in that context. So I think there's a lot of good product placements in this. For me, it's the Alka-Seltzer. I mean, I know, wow, I took this one right off of there because it's the hands down winner. But you see the guy eat a cigar, you see a guy chug the motor oil, and then he just goes to the Alka-Seltzer, and he's totally fine.
Right. Even if you may have a bad diet at home, maybe you drink a little bit too much, or you have too much red meat, but this guy can eat cigars and crush motor oil, and a little bit of Alka-Seltzer can calm his tummy.
This had to be the best bang for your buck in terms of product placement of all time. I bet more Alka-Seltzer was sold because of this movie than anything ever. I know it's hard to track, but I'm confident that that's true.
I checked the cabinet after the movie to see if we had any Alka-Seltzer, just in case. We don't.
You have plenty of others to choose from, but I think clearly that one is head and shoulders above.
Yeah, that's definitely the best one. I'm going to go with the Nintendo ad when Michael has his forced arm wrestling matchup against the local bully on top of the pinball machine. They were sandwiched between 2 Nintendo games. It was Super Mario Brothers behind Michael, and then I couldn't tell what the game was. I don't know if it was Castlevania or what, but when you went to the bully behind him and his 2 goons, there was another Nintendo game there. So every frame that you got was just Nintendo, which I also, playing on top of the pinball machine doesn't seem like the best place for an arm. It also feels like an advantage because they typically slant up.
They do. They slant up. It definitely seemed like an advantage for the kid that lost. So
exactly, for the kid that lost.
He really lost. And there were some other great ones. I mean, I think that those 2 are phenomenal. I thought the Adidas, all of the Adidas, I loved that. I thought that attire could fit in today.
Hawk's truck, the Brute, for the first part of the movie. What was it? Smell Like a Man, I think it was. Solo Flex had a big run at the competition as well. People working out on Solo Flex machines, Solo Flex tank tops and shirts.
Do you think that you could get jacked enough as those guys were from the Solo Flex? Isn't the Solo Flex, wasn't that bendy things?
I don't think there were actual weights on it. Yeah. We had one that held laundry in our basement for.
Yeah, exactly. It's where your coats.
Well, I think with that, the amount of steroids these guys are on, any slight lifting is going to bulk them up. We'll get to spin-off ideas. So what spin-offs from this movie would you like to see?
So I have a couple. And the first one, and I think this is probably stretching the definition of spin-offs a bit. I want a documentary about the background of the real-life arm wrestler that played Grizzly. You could make it either into, fictionalize it if you want to, but it sounds crazy enough that I want that actual documentary of how that arm wrestler came up. I think that would be fantastic. Debatable if it's a spinoff, but I'm going with it.
I think that most certainly qualifies. I got to go with how did Grandfather Cutler amass his fortune, and what is he into to have a compound like he does, and to have an army of goons at his disposal to track down his missing son, to have like 6 of them attempt a kidnapping just because he asked them. These aren't like executives; these are goons. Terry Funk is one of his the wrestler is one of his main goons who gets pushed through the window. But he just has an army of goons waiting for him to just snap his fingers and say, "You need to do this right now." And I wonder how he acquired this wealth and power.
It's the late 80s. It's got to be Coke, right? It's got to be Coke. And it's interesting because there is that point where Michael's in the car with his dad and he's like, "Oh, did you sell drugs?" Or, he's talking about, so it's an interesting, I feel like it was probably the grandfather saying, "Don't look over here. Your father is actually the drug dealer." Meanwhile, he's drug kingpin with army of goons and statues that were probably used to smuggle in Coke inside the statue. I got one other, and it's a bit of maybe left field, but I think that you could have either a movie or an anthology series taking place in that roadside diner. I think the characters coming in and out of that, you got the truckers, you got these random kids who are like punk kids hanging out by the video games. Everyone seems to know each other. I think you could just have a whole sort of series of vignettes taking place in this roadside diner. It's probably maybe a different audience than for Over the Top. I think this is maybe your prestige television.
Yeah, I feel like this was just a snippet into that roadside restaurant's life. There was it was an exciting arm wrestling match between him and Smasher, but that was just one of many events that day.
And I'd like to see all of them.
I'd like to see, was it Bo or Bull Hurley? Bull?
I think it was Bull. Yeah.
Bull. Yeah, he had a 5-year run of not losing a match, breaking arms, and just being an absolute terror. So I would like to see his 5-year run.
I'd love to see that. I mean, he looked the part too. They paid him an extra $10,000 to shave his head. He had never had a shaved head before that. And then he was like, "This looks so great." He always had a shaved head for the rest of his life.
He was supposed to punch Stallone in the face at some point during the final scene, but he couldn't tell Stallone when he was going to do it. He was going to surprise him so that it was real. So that reaction you saw when he got punched in the face, when Stallone got punched in the face, was legit because he didn't know that was coming and he actually hit him.
You never know with Stallone because he's such a great actor. Is that just Stallone being Stallone? But that's a great tidbit.
And our final question: does this make your shelf?
I think the shelf is a sacred place. You have to choose carefully when you're putting a movie on your shelf. It's your reputation. It's who you are. It's your identity. And 100% am I putting this on my shelf. Absolutely.
Same here. We did a movie last week in Anaconda where you talked about how it's basically timeless. It could be at any time. It could be in the 1700s, 1800s, 19, whatever. It could be any time. This is not that movie. This is specifically, if you want to know what like 1987 was, the hairstyles, the clothing, the music, if you want a glimpse into an era and you want to have a great time along the way, this movie is definitely on the shelf. I would recommend this to anyone who has any bit of curiosity about the 80s.
That's exactly right. This movie is a slice of time. It is a slice of life. Phenomenal soundtrack. Really puts you in squarely in the late 80s. All around, great film, time capsule. Put it in the Library of Congress right now.
Absolutely. Another double shelf here on this podcast. And do we want a little teaser for next week?
I think we should give it to people in case they want to start watching it. I imagine there are people who want to watch it several times just like us. So I think let's give the people what they want. So
I just happened to watch this a few days ago with my wife and kind of didn't realize that it was on our list. I couldn't believe that it was sub 50 in both categories, but Jeepers Creepers from 2001. Where'd you get those peepers?
I'm so excited for this. I haven't seen this one in years, and I cannot wait to watch it.
Me neither. This is awesome, and I can't wait for next week.